recording. Let's see here. I'm going to show our pretty faces. There we are. I don't know if the camera will try to focus on that. It's funny, sometimes it focuses on that. We're completely blurry, and then other times it's pretty good.
Yep.
Okay, let me see. Got my comments and reactions. Wasn't Mohammed supposed to join us today? Slacker?
No, or
yeah.
Yes.
How do we? So send him a link, dude. Let's just
send him a link.
Get her done.
We need it from.
Oh wait, I got some software here. Where do I go?
Right here.
This one?
Yep.
There's a little button. This here.
Well, the actual link. Just
Copy link.
Send that over to me.
I'm gonna slack that over. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I think the mics are working good.
Yep.
Yeah, we're getting Mohammed on today. We need his help.
Yes.
All right. Mohammed should be on Slack too. All right. Mohammed, you have a link going your way. I can't get Kevin to use the Mail app on the Mac, so he's got to open up 20,000 browsers for the 20,000 emails he has. Kids, man, these kids.
I'm stubborn with the Mail app. I've had too many.
I'm aging out. What do you mean you had bad experience?
I had a bad experience. I have it on my phone, and it just doesn't work.
It doesn't make. What do you mean it doesn't work? Explain that.
It doesn't work.
You can't just say it doesn't work. That's like saying it might rain tomorrow. What didn't work? Because I use it on the Mac. I use it it's all sunk. It stays synced up.
I had my email on there, and I would get it through the browser. I got the email, got the notification. On Mail, I would not get it. It's still like 2 years behind.
Because that may have taken it out of the inbox and put it into like a junk, and you didn't have it set up right.
Maybe.
Now, if you're using the Mac Mail and the Mac app there, and you set it up right, which isn't that hard when you're using both of them, you're never going to have that problem again. The only problem I have sometimes is searching, depending on where the mail is sort of originating, or sometimes I can't find something. But other than that, that will stay in sync. All right, I see Mohammed here now. What do we got to do here to get?
Let me take the keys here.
Kevin's taking over. Hold on. I'm gonna get.
Where's all our scenes here? Okay. So we have. All right. So we'll do this for now.
Just get them like we did with David. Or
I'm missing all the.
Remember we did the Delaney guest. Yeah.
Right here.
Guest Mohammed. Oh, okay. So now he's there.
We got Mohammed there, and then when we switch, I'll do it on the
switch. Let's just switch right now. Let's just get her done. So I got to switch him over here. Get him on that scene right there.
Yep. So.
And I can't hear him. Why can't I hear him?
Get him there. Okay. We have Mohammed there. We cannot hear Mohammed.
Mohammed, say something. No, we can't hear him. So
make sure the audio output is good, Mohammed, on that interface you see. It might have switched to a different mic.
I mean, there's nothing that we're doing.
Hello.
Oh, there he is.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry. Yeah, my mic.
I'm gonna turn this up.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here. I couldn't believe that at some point we'll join you in a show.
Can you help us out? Okay, one more thing before we start. Remember there was the feedback thing when it was coming out of my speaker?
Yeah.
I don't know where that is.
It should just be... It should already be enabled, but I don't know why I can't see all the overlays.
I know, dude. Something happened one day and the overlays went.
Okay, let's try this. There we go. And
it's
already on.
Okay,
so we're good.
Okay, finally I have Mohammed on here. Mohammed's been helping us since day one. He finds all of my problems, all my bugs. It's nice that I have better hair than Mohammed, though. That's my only saving grace. See.
Yeah,
Mohammed, where are you hanging out these days?
So right now I'm in Rotterdam. I'm originally from Iran, but it's 3 years that I came to Netherlands, and I live in Rotterdam.
Netherlands, man.
That's cool.
I've never been to that city. I've been to Amsterdam, and I've been to another city that I had to take a bus to, where all the corporate buildings are. It's boring. UTech, something like UTech. I think.
Yeah, you are always welcome to come. So please ping me if
No,
you
for
came
sure.
here.
How far away from Amsterdam are you?
Not too much, like 1 hour or 100 kilometer. So yeah, that's quite close. And yeah, Netherlands has a good public transport
So here's
compared
the
to.
problem with everybody in Europe. I've learned Celsius. I keep my clocks on military time. So you can say 1900. I know it's 7 o'clock. I don't have to think about it.
Oh,
Okay. Now, I ran track where 1,600 meters or 1.6 kilometers is a mile.
Yeah.
So I have to still do that math when somebody says it's a kilometer. My brain's got to go, shit, somewhere between a half a mile and a mile. And I'm like having to do that,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because I can't think in terms of kilometers yet. And there's no way in the States to sort of put you in that mode. I could put my clocks in the mode I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And Celsius, I just practice all the time. I have a little chart in my head for Celsius.
A chart.
Here's my Celsius chart. You ready? Everybody's going to love this. 16 degrees Celsius is 60 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
Now you add 6 degrees to that. So you get to 22.
Mm-hmm.
You're at 70.
Okay.
Okay. 27 is then 80. Add another 6. Okay, to that 27. Now you're at, 33?
33.
You're at 90.
Okay.
And you get to like 38 and you're at 100.
So you go through the math.
So I have this math in my head, right, for this. So I just have to remember 16, 27, 38 is 60, 80, 100. And then there's a 6-point swing in between. This is why Fahrenheit is so much better than Celsius. Fight me on that. Okay? Because nobody goes and says, well, it's 16.3 degrees today, right? But we get that 0.3 in Fahrenheit when we say 73. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah,
like, you know the difference between 70 and 73. You can feel that.
Yeah.
See, Europe has lost that because nobody will say 0.3. They just won't do it.
Okay.
And so it just, okay, but I have that in my head. But it's 1,000 kilometers. Don't mean anything to me.
Move this here.
Okay, anyway, enough of this nonsense. We got Mohammed here. We got to write some code. Okay, so our goal today was to get a peer-to-peer networking connection between your machine and my machine. We're not going to be able to do it with Mohammed today, but the fallback is still JetBrains. And then maybe on the next show, we'll see how we do today. We should be able to, Mohammed, and I haven't played with it yet, but Tailscale when we get the Tailscale client working on your local machine and my machine and Kevin's, we should be able to create a peer-to-peer connection over that, which would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that software is designed for. And we're looking to play with that in the Prediction Guard project. So I haven't played with it yet, but at least we'll get a peer-to-peer connection between Kevin and me here.
By the way, I also asked this one time in the comment, but probably you missed that. So what about Go Leap P2P? Can we use that instead of our client and server?
Well, you could use anything we want, but the point was to write it ourselves so we can learn.
Yeah, okay.
That being said,
Go Leap library. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
You said it's Go Leap?
Go
Lib.
Go Lib, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And it's been used in Ethereum as well, so maybe not this one.
No, that don't look like. I don't know anything about this library.
So it's go dash leap P2P.
Oh, go lab lib P2P.
Yeah, something like that.
Lib.
Oh, this one.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure, like for production level projects where you need this, you probably want to use this. And I would almost recommend it probably at some level. But the key is that we wanted to learn how to sort of build something
Yeah.
ourselves here. And
The interval.
Yeah.
this, like, I could just have integrated this and then been done in 2 minutes maybe. But I think it's kind of cool to see how you could sort of begin to build something like this yourself. Plus, yeah, I mean, it came out of the IPFS project, which is trying to, again, one of these decentralized file systems
Okay.
is what that's sort of trying to implement, IPFS, right? So in a protocol, whatever, I forgot what IP stands for, but yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and probably want to use this. I mean, there's other things too, like Raft implementations, if you were really going to go sort of all out, right? For service to
Yeah.
things like that. But I'm glad you brought this up so people watching the show can see a properly. It would be interesting even to look at the code that's here. So
Yeah, so it used Kademlia, if I pronounce it correctly, dynamic hash tables, DHTs, to give you a random key or ID, whatever, and then based on that ID, understand who is connected to what. That's how it works. Distributed hash table. Yeah.
Yeah. So most likely, if you were really trying to go decentralized and needed service discovery and needed all that, it's probably a good place to go. But we were just trying to build so we can see it ourselves, right? Because
Yeah.
all our stuff's going to be hard coded. We're going to have to put IP addresses in our little database. And if that IP address is there, then we can connect to it. The problem that we're going to find out is that because of DHCP, I was wondering what DHCP stood for. I can't remember DHCP. Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So all of your modems there, you connect to it through DHCP, which basically means it gives you a random IP address on the local network.
Okay.
It will usually reassign the same local IP address to you for about 30 days. However, it doesn't have to do that. So the bottom line is we're going to look on my machine. Remember, I said we can use ifconfig to look what I never remember which one to look at. EN0 or something, I think.
Yeah.
And that didn't help because it's multi-line, but so one of these, no, that might be that will be the broadcast. So if you do an IF config on yours and then search for EN0, that you should have a different address there. You have 229, right? Okay. So on the local, and that 192.168 is reserved for the local network, right? Like that's not an global internet address. That's reserved for local. So basically, the AT&T modem, cable box, whatever you want to call it, assigned me that IP address, assigned you 229, and there's a good chance that tomorrow, if I rebooted this and came back on and tried to get another one, there's a good chance it will give me the same one for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
But at some point, that's going to change. So what some people do, like I used to do this back in the day. Not at home so much, but like in an office where you've got printers connecting to a local network, and you're trying to access it over the network. You might go into the modem and tell the modem for this MAC address, right? Because every one of these network cards have a unique, we call it the machine MAC. I've got machine access control, I don't know. But every one of these network cards has an embedded sort of unique ID on them.
Okay.
So when your network card talks to that modem, high level, it's saying, hey, this is my MAC address. So we can map a MAC address to this. So I could go in the modem right now and find the printer on that list, right? And tell DHCP every time this MAC address connects, you always use this IP address.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So it stays static forever. And back in the day, that's how we'd get these printers sort of all working and connected. Now, with name resolution and all that support, it shouldn't matter anymore because you're asking the box, where is name? But in the early days, it was a nightmare. If you didn't lock these devices down sort of with a static IP address, even locally. Now, I'm not going to do that on here. And so later, at some point, not today, in a week or two, or even the next time we talk, we're going to have to double check what our IP addresses are. We're going to have to change them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how Tailscale works. I'd like to think that somehow there'll be something there. I don't know, right? So just understand that even though this is my IP address today on the local LAN,
it could rotate.
It's going to rotate at some point, unless I go to the box, modem box, and lock it down.
Got it.
Okay. So we've got a few things that we need to do today. I'd love to try to get a connection established right now. I think we're finally done with our little foundational TCP package.
Yeah.
Oh, I did want to. This is why I write notes, man, because my brain doesn't remember things. I said I wanted to write one more. Okay, we're going to write one more hack program today. We're going to write a hack program today.
Oh, you did tell me about that.
That allows. I wanted to write two hack programs, or one hack program today, where we have some Go routines come up in server mode. Why did I want to do that though? Because we already have. I should have wrote it down. My brain said, "You're not going to forget it." Right now, we've tested a server with our client manager, with the dial and the write, and extending the writer here for that. What we've got to do next is go into the cap. Okay, so we added the double click event. I'm sorry, we haven't looked at this code in a few days, so my brain's trying to reiterate through. We have a double click event.
Yeah.
On the double click event, if we have that IP address in the list, then we're going to want to try to establish a client connection.
Yeah.
Right? And so the cap's got to come up initially with the ability to accept these client connections. We need to be able to add the IP address to our little database too. So let's do the following, because I don't remember what I wanted to do on the hack program, because I should have written it down. Let's go back to our cap here.
Also, one question, Bill, here. We tested the scenario one server with two clients, multiple clients. When we want to implement this in our cap to cap, so I have a cap, my cap should be able to connect with different servers, like, so it's right. Is that correct? Should we also test that, or?
I think if we were able to establish a single connection, that I think the hack program gave us enough to know that given a server and a connection, we did find the bug where we weren't using the right local address or remote address for the unique thing. Mm-hmm. That was good. We found that bug. Maybe that's what I wanted to do, and we ended up squeezing it in at the end. But let's just go for this. Yeah. And if we run into a problem, we can go back to our hack program and solve it. That's why I love the hack programs, just to sort of knock down all the walls so we have a clean idea of, right? Some people like to do this with tests. When you hear like test-driven development, people are doing what I do with hack programs, sort of with tests, which at some level isn't necessarily bad, because if you write the tests properly, now you have a test that sort of stays with you. And I don't end up having that, right? I'm more trying to just quickly hack. That hack program is almost now like my chat window.
Okay.
In a sense, like hacking until I learn more. But probably if we were writing tests instead, think of the test suite we would have right now. right? Instead of code that
Yeah.
I'm throwing away. There's something to say about that.
Something a little more reusable.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that was good code, right? We learned something.
Yeah.
I started the industry. I didn't even start writing tests until I got to Go in 2013. I remember when I was coding in C#, maybe back in like 2010, one of the guys that worked for me came to me and said, "Bill, look, we can write tests in C# now." And I looked at him. I said, "Get out of my office, man. I don't have time for this. I got code I have to write. I don't have time to like add code to the project because you want to do this." And I think back on that now, like how ignorant that was.
And that was like the new thing to write tests. That was
Yeah, I mean, and again, I even for the first year in Go, I don't think I wrote tests. And now the thought of writing production level software without some testing makes me nauseous, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, indeed.
that's like growing. It's just like all the AI tooling, right? Your first instinct is to sort of push back on things because of change.
And then you try it for a little bit, give it a chance. And
But once because you have to adapt. Like I had to adapt to testing and I waited way too long. And that's always in the back of my head. That's why I started to embrace this tooling more. Now the tooling is 10 times better than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is a problem because you might have looked at something a year ago and it was, for lack of a better word, shit. And now in your head it's shit and you don't go back to it. And now today the tooling is just it's pretty
awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's
good.
pretty awesome.
Man.
It does some cool stuff.
Yeah.
When you're completely clueless, it is really, really, really good. My problem is that when it comes to Go, I'm rarely that clueless unless I'm looking at a new library or something like I was playing with DuckDB yesterday, trying to see how its vector data stuff worked. And I asked Gemini, can you write me a program that uses DuckDB and went like this.
Yeah.
So then I noticed it wasn't using the index, and I asked it, okay, it's not using the index. What am I doing wrong? And it gave me some code, and it ended up, there's no way anybody could have known, not even Gemini, why it wasn't working, but it got me there, right?
It gets you a place to start and kind of understand what you're working with.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to establish our server here. So we've got a new, what do we got a server here? A new server, right? So this is going to have to happen in main, and it's got to, well, it should just be able to happen in main here. So do we need any parameters when it comes to the server? We do have a server config. So we've got net type, address with the port, things like that. So let's do the following here. We're going to have to add a section here called, we'll just call it TCP, right? Okay. I think at least I'm going to need net type. I'm going to need address. I should look at the server config, shouldn't I? I need this too. Net type and address, right? We need these two things. All right. I don't know why it chose that, but oh no, what's the default? The default net type should be TC. What are the net types, dude?
TCP.
We're going to use TCP4. We'll just restrict it to TCP4. And then the address can just be, we could use 4,000.
Okay.
Everybody give her 4,000?
Yep. TCP4, 4,000.
Okay. So what are you complaining about that we're not using it yet? Oh, I forgot the quote. I love linters. Linters, vet, all that stuff has saved me so much pain, dude, over the years. That's the one good thing.
I recently started writing Python code. So last year, switched my job from software engineer to data engineering a bit. And it's almost 1 year that I don't write actively Golang codes. And I really miss the linter, the compiler, everything. which we don't have in Python.
So you're making me sad because Kevin and I just got on a Python project.
Yeah, we're going the other
In
direction.
fact, I called Mickey to Becca. I said, I need like 2 hours of your time, Mickey, because Mickey's like a Python guru. And I got to take this Python project and sort of clean it up and get it restructured. And it took us about an hour yesterday just to get the Python plugin with the IntelliSense working properly in the editor.
Yeah.
But
yeah, indeed.
I'm going to have to ask Mickey now about linters and stuff there.
I'm sure there's an easier way to do it than what we did.
I'm afraid, though, the moment I turn that on, everything's going to go yellow in that project. You know, that's my problem. My brain sees yellow lines and stuff. I have to clean it up right away. I can't deal with it. That's why I keep the editor at a minimum. And I've played with Python a tiny bit, but I've never written it from a production standpoint. So getting Mickey's time is going to be. It's just that everything is sort of in Python right now if you're touching AI, and it's a bummer. And the real problem I have is we could write almost everything that's in there in Go.
Except the DB.
Except the DB, because they're using Lance DB and there's no Go support for it. And I can't swap that out because they're really using it in some unique ways. But I was told that eventually we're going to hand this code off, and it ain't going to be handed off to people who know Go. So like that's starting to happen now. It's one thing if we're like maintaining it, but if you're now writing stuff for clients on the AI side, you can't assume it's a Go shop at any level. So I guess my Python foo is about to get better. Okay.
Yeah.
So we know we need those two things. Let's look at the sections here. This is the config side. This side was reading. What was this side doing here? It was getting the cap ID. Okay. Yeah, and we just sort of put it in here. We didn't have a place to. I feel like this could have been encapsulated somewhere, but I guess we didn't really have a place for it. Because this feels like a lot of code now that I'm looking at it for that. Like a lot of lower level code, you know?
Yeah.
Where. Because at the end of the day, what we were trying to get is a cap ID, right?
Yeah.
This just feels. Hold on a second. Let's do the following. I'm just curious. At a bare minimum.
Move it down. So,
all right, we got to return an error. We know that. I need the.
In this function, we have used multiple areas, something very similar to create different files.
Say it again.
So this logic, this more or less the same logic, we have used it in different areas.
Oh, we have.
Yeah.
I think for probably the data, JSON to pull information from there.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Messages, most likely.
All right. See this log we can bring out. And I need the cap ID, right? All right. We'll when that comes up, we'll look at that again. If we can. I'm not anti-dry when it makes sense, but I just felt like I was reading through the code and that was too low level.
Yeah.
What I'm sort of looking at there, right? Oh, it's actually a UUID, isn't it? Shoot. All right.
I've heard that like word a lot recently. Dry. Like I've heard you say dry a lot. What is
dry stands for do not repeat yourself.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And what happens with dry too many times is people abuse it.
Okay.
They encapsulate so much and over encapsulate things that you lose the readability of
it becomes
something.
hard to find what
becomes
what's
abstracted.
Actually,
it's hard, and your code now becomes a little brittle because you've got so much sitting on that encapsulation that if you make one change, that
you break a lot.
You could break a lot.
Yeah.
And so what happens with my projects is in the app layer code, there's a lot of dry being done with middleware because there is a lot of like boilerplate code there that I think dry can take advantage. But as you go down the architecture for me, the project structure, there's a lot less of it. In the foundation layer, I don't want the import. I rather copy and paste code around than try to create a package of common things that you're importing. That creates brittleness in the business layer too. So you'll see in any of my code bases, the farther we go down in the stack, the less you're going to see in terms of dry, and the more we're just going to copy and paste code,
Got
and
it.
just to keep that any sort of change isolated. I don't buy the idea. Well, if you find a bug in that code, you got to change it in 5 places. Not really. Not technically, if it isn't broken somewhere else.
Yeah.
Then maybe not, right? Maybe the bug that you found was very specific to this package's implementation of that code.
And then you only change that one.
That's right. There's no reason to change it because I've seen people do that and now they fixed it here. Now they broke something that wasn't broken.
Gotcha.
You see? So
Yeah.
at the highest level of your app, dry tends to make sense, but on the lowest levels of your app, it causes other problems in general, right?
Gotcha.
But now, if you see this change that we just made, now I'm not wondering what that code did, even though I had the header. Now it's just get the cap ID. And we've sort of hidden
Much clearer.
the details there. We don't need an entire package for that. We just needed a function to be able to do that. It didn't need to log. Putting it out here was fine, right? So we have the cap ID. We've got the NATs here. We've got our chat bus. That's allowing socket connections internally to find each other. And then we started the API. So I feel like what we could do in here is we had NATs. We have the chat bus. And here we can have the TCP stuff, right? We can have the TCP stuff.
Yeah.
I paused because I'm thinking about the sort of order of things, right? And so maybe here is where we do tcp.new server. It's given the server a name and a server config. Now, we wanted to give it a name. Do I already have something that we can... I think I had the idea of giving it a name. Oh, look at this. That's funny. Giving it a name because of having multiple somewhere along the lines and logging.
Okay.
Right? So from a logging perspective. So let's just do this just because I need it and no reason not to. I don't know what a good name is. It's for, but we just call it cap. That's fine. I'm wondering why that isn't going over other than I must have a problem here. So this would be cfg.tcp.name. And now we need a server config. So I'll just do this. I can't use CFG, but we can just do server config. I don't know. And this would be a TCP server config, wouldn't it? Now, we've got our net type, okay? We know that's going to be cfg.tcp.net type. We have our address, and then we had handlers. Okay. So now we had those handlers that we had in the hack program. Now, here's something that I don't like doing. I don't like having multiple files associated with package main. I just hate that, especially if you're trying to do the go run. Now it gets all a little bit more sort of complicated. But we have to write essentially, at least define it if we don't know how to do it yet, but we need to implement this, right?
Okay.
We have these functions.
Yeah.
I don't think they belong in main. They don't. This stuff doesn't belong in main. So let's think about domains for a second. we had a single chat app domain, which was really associated with this one route, right?
Yeah.
These are almost like routes in the sense that data is going to be coming sort of into them, right? I don't think we need a business level domain for anything here, but we have to implement this code. Essentially, we got to implement this code somewhere along the line. So from my project structure point of view, that tends to be domain. This is a domain of something, right? This is, and so why don't we start out right now, at least, with a domain here? Maybe we'll call it the TCP app, because I don't know lack of a better word right now, where we can write these types and sort of hide it within the scope of a domain of things. Because I don't want to keep it here at all. Even though this is specific to CAP, right? I mean, these things are specific to, at least the chat app was. So let's just do this for now. I don't know if it's going to stay here, dude. But my brain says that at least we need...
We can play the idea out.
Yeah, we can play the idea out. I love that. If you don't get anything else out of this, right, let's at least play the idea out. I'll tell you one thing. This stuff is really good for just giving you comments, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. So let me steal this code for a second. It can't be unexported. This has to be exported stuff.
But actually, the server one, right? Or
say it again?
The TCP server handler should be here, or client?
We need the server handler. Did I take the wrong thing? Took the wrong thing.
Okay.
This is why Mohammed's on the call.
That's the maximum contribution that
I would have gotten there eventually, but all right. Right now, I don't know what to put in here, so I'm just gonna keep this empty for a second because I don't know what to do other than we're just gonna return nil 0 not implemented, and we're gonna come back to this. All right, but we need this here, and this needs to be exported too. And maybe what I'll do is just give it a full name now that it's under a namespace, right? So we need this type, server handlers. I don't remember if we chose to put comments above
We
exported
didn't.
stuff, right? We chose not to do that.
I don't think we did.
I just want to be consistent. Actually, we did.
Oh, we did there.
See, I've said this before. Like, I don't do this on projects anymore because I just can't get anybody to do it. And static check doesn't care anymore. I do it for third-party packages we're building. So sort of anything under foundation.
Yeah, that's where I've seen
honestly, it should be there. But the problem is that if you don't do it while you're writing code,
you won't get back to them.
You just don't get back to it, and nobody wants to get back to it. But, you know, with the way Copilot works, you almost can just...
It's very painless. Yeah.
It's pretty painless at this point. And you read it, and it's usually pretty good. Okay, so I've got handlers here now under TCP app, which I think is okay. And we can use that in its 0 value state, right? So this could be TCP app dot server handlers. It works in its 0 value state. Now, we could argue from a coding perspective that this feels weird, doesn't it? Doesn't that feel weird to you? It always feels weird to me. I don't like using open and closing curly brackets for 0 value. I like, if I can use var, like with a wait group, it feels better. And so sometimes I see this and I feel like that's not going to be as intuitive.
Yeah,
if we do this, right? Because now watch sort of what happens here. even if it's not taking anything,
Okay, yeah.
it just feels better, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the compiler is gonna it's gonna inline that anyway. So there's no real, but then again, it's gonna be an allocation because of the way we're using it. But bottom line is, even though this feels useless, it feels better here. Okay. And then we've got the logger. I don't think I can just pass log here. So we got to look at the logger again. And the logger, let's look at the hack program again. The logger was essentially this function, right?
Yeah.
So if we come back here and just do this for a second. Now, the way I did this is you get an event, you get a type, you get an IP address, and then some sort of format, right? So if we put this back in our sort of context. Oh, yeah, context could have a trace. We don't have the idea of it. We'll have to deal with this idea of a trace ID in a little while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the log's going to look for trace ID, and in these cases, it's not going to find it, and the log's just going to see sort of zero, which might be okay, but we'll deal with some of that later. All right, so now you have the idea of a message. TCP event, let's just say for now. And then essentially our logger is a key value sort of pair, right? So I want to keep the font for a minute. So you have event, and we've got our type. Sorry. Then we've got our address and the IP address.
Why not put the E at the end of the type? Like, was there a purpose?
Because it's a keyword.
Yeah, that's reserved. Yeah.
It's reserved. You can't do it. And then we have, I can't use message because that's what the first thing is here, but I need a keyword for this information, and I can't say MSG. I can say info maybe. Okay, fine. So that could be our logger, right? And we'll get that information and log it, and we'll deal with trace IDs in the log later. And then this is our server config, but maybe I'm going to call this TCP config because that feels better. Now, this server can returns a server or an error. And I think we had a shutdown on this, didn't we?
Yeah, shutdown.
Yeah. Given a context, which for now, I'll just do this, but that's not a good context to use for that. We probably want to set a proper context with a certain timeout because this will be empty, right? But we'll deal with that later. So now this gives us a server. It's holding the server. What was the API of our server again? Let's take a look at that real quick. The server gave us the ability to shut down, get the name.
Listen.
Oh, we need to call listen, don't we? Let's go back to our hack program. We need to do this. And then we need to, okay. We got to do a couple things here. Let's copy this code. What I might do, because there's so much more code here, right?
Split up TCP and
Yeah, because there's so much more code here, right? And we shouldn't be using this. We should be using log.info. Again, deal with that later. Okay, good. Everybody's happy with that? You see now this comes. Oh, did I? All right, we'll deal with this in a second. Because I called that logger.
Oh.
That screwed something up down there.
There it is.
Yeah. Okay. That's what happens when you need the namespace. Sometimes you don't need the namespace. You can create a variable under that, which would have been a mistake anyway there. But, okay, so now this is a channel. And the part of what we were doing here was, remember on the hack side, we were listening for the server errors. And if that happened, we had to shut down. Now, okay, let's think about this. Because we're essentially here. Yeah, it's the same code as we had here, isn't it? Like, kind of don't want that to ever happen, right? We want a clean shutdown. But on a clean shutdown, let me steal these 2 lines of code. On a clean shutdown, the order of this sort of matters. So we already have the shutdown here. But I think we need, so this is where we have to be careful. So we have a particular shutdown timeout that we have to reach for both, right? So we're going to shut this down first, and then we're going to shut down our API. Probably, it all depends on the order. We should do it in reverse. So if we're creating the TCP server first, then NATS, chat bus, and then the API, then my guess is we need to do it in that order. Let all those socket connections sort of clear first on the WebSocket side, right? Because that's basically what we're doing there. We're not accepting anymore. We're shutting down anything that's in flight, which would be WebSocket connections, and then we shut down our TCP server. Okay. So you really got to kind of do it in the reverse order.
Because we're doing TCP first, and then we're doing...
I mean, that's why I paused before about which one do we do first, because the order matters.
Yeah.
Right? So we're giving ourselves the ability to establish peer-to-peer connections. Then we're giving us the connectivity to NATs, then local communication, and then the web service, which now finally says, start accepting connections to the CAP. Right? And now when you're shutting down, you're like, okay, stop accepting connections to the CAP and shut everything down that's connected. By the time we get here, there isn't anything that wants to use a TCP peer-to-peer connection. It's safe to sort of shut it down.
Got it.
That's why the order really matters. I've run into those order problems on shutdown all the time. And at some point, we're going to play with a few connections and signaling to shut down, and you got to make sure it shuts down cleanly. That's where you find data races and stuff. I used to say that early on in a project like this, when especially anytime you touch main, you have to pick one day, never Friday because it will ruin your weekend. Maybe on Thursday, you spend 2 hours playing the shutdown game.
Okay.
Bring it up, hit Control-C, shut it down. Bring it up, establish like a connection, do a couple of things, let them manually drop off, shut it down. Bring it up, keeping hot connections, bring it down. And the last one is hot connections that are actually doing something, now shut it down.
Shut it down while they're doing
So
something.
it's like 4 little things you do, one at a time. And if you can get all of that and your software shuts down cleanly, you haven't broke anything as you add new server stuff. But you kind of do it in that order. Just up, you've done nothing down, right? Because each one comes with its complexity.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got shut down for this. So we could even, right now, I would test startup and shut down.
And just make sure it comes up.
Yeah, make sure it comes up and make sure it shuts down, right? Because if it doesn't, there's no reason to start adding any more code. We've already broke. Yeah, we've already broke something, already right? Broken. Yeah, something's already broken. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this space here. Okay, so we've added this server thingy now that can listen. So let's just try that right out of the box here. What was that? Make, run cap?
Yeah.
So
there's a 0.
So this is good. Yeah, that's the 0, right?
The trace IDs.
What would be nice is to give this log its own trace ID, even if it's static, so we can recognize it.
That it's that.
That it's always that, right? Mm-hmm. But we'll do that in a second. But
this trace ID should be related to the cap ID or per week?
It's just a unique ID. Essentially, it's a unique ID for every request. But this isn't a request, right? But these logs are associated with the TCP server. So I think if we gave it a unique ID, then when we're looking at the logs, we always know that that ID is associated with the TCP server.
Yeah, okay.
Right? At least from our brain, because 0 basically is for like main and startup. We should never see that again, but we're going to keep seeing zeros now when you see this happening, like on this line here. So you see we've got the starting, and then we have the TCP event where it's now listening on port 4000, which is great. Now when I hit Control C, it did shut down cleanly. Beautiful. All right, so we see the stop event. We see this event, listener shut down. So like everything I'm seeing is beautiful here, right? Like we had a clean startup, we had a clean shutdown, even though we haven't done anything.
Yeah.
You got to run this test now, because if this is breaking, it gets harder to find this because you're now thinking it's all this other stuff you've added.
Yeah, more changes.
More change, right? So every time we do something now, we're gonna have to double check start and stop, start and stop, start. We're gonna add some more code, check start and stop. That's where you're gonna find your data races, like almost immediately. Okay, so I love everything we see there other than the trace ID, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's happening in the log, I just come up here for a second. You see the logger is running this function. It's looking for a trace ID in the context, but at the web level. At the web level.
We want it to be in the TCP.
Well, I have a couple things here. We could. I don't know if we've exposed it because we've never needed to before. Oh, I do. See, set trace ID.
Mm-hmm.
So we could do the following. When we, this context here, we could create a new context, right? Let's see this for a second. Context. Say I start with a background context. I'm just thinking this out. Okay. Then if I say web.setTraceID, this context, and I say UUID dot, let's just start with like a new.
There it is. Yep.
which would mean that it changes every single time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mistake I always make is the assignment, forgetting to assign it back, because this is a value semantic thing. See, now if I do this, it's not going to be 0. This will set a UUID in there now.
It'll just be a random.
Right now, it's going to be random. Oh.
Oh no.
It should have been in there. Oh, I have it here. I have it here. That's fine. Because this is still main.
Okay.
This stuff is still main. So that 0 is fine. But you see, it has this ID now.
Yeah.
Now, it might be nice if maybe we could create a static UUID. So it's the same in the log every single time. I don't know if that's important. What do you think, Mohammed? Do you think that it matters that it's the same, or just that we know what it is for this particular log and we can then just sort of see it?
Yeah, I think it's not. So that's why I asked, is this something bind to the cap ID? But that's not the case. So if that's something to the cap ID is static, then this should be static. But that's not the case. So it could be random. What I'm wondering, we use different contexts, one for TCP, one for web, one for API. Should that be also always one context, or like what you did right now, you created a separate context in terms of better context management?
Well, I needed a context here purely for our ability to have a trace ID. That being said, we could also use this for shutting down, right? I could set a particular timeout on this now too, saying how long you have to shut down. That's kind of cool. However, when we're logging related to NATs, I don't remember what the logs look like. When we run the whole thing, let's go back and look at the logs as relates to trace IDs for... Well, here's the thing, Mohammed. Let's go back here to chat. Every socket connection is going to get its own trace ID. So
Yes.
This is our client connecting to the cap. And all messages that are happening between client and cap will have its own unique trace ID. So that's good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's those Go routines right now that are interacting with the NATS stuff. Because NATS isn't its own Go routine per se. So I think we're fine there. Your question is going to be not on the server side, where we've sort of created a context and a trace ID for everything that's server handlers. So
I'm wondering, in this main.go, do we only have one single context, use it everywhere, or based on different resources?
For startup, we have a single context that comes from main.
Okay.
So everything startup and shutdown, we do. I'm adding a second context here because we've got this event handler, in a sense, the logging, and I don't want it to be 0. But what you made me just realize is that I could put the context here as well and save this context. Because now what will happen is when we log, I need the logger too, don't I?
Yes.
That should be a pointer, by the way. I need the logger too, because now when I log in here, if I log with this context, we'll get this ID for everything that's server-based.
Okay.
But what we're going to have to do is when we establish a bind here. We'll have to think about this because I don't know yet. But establishing a bind here is no different than when we accept a socket connection from a client, right?
Yes.
And that would mean that we should be able to create a unique trace ID for that client. So it's quite possible. Traditionally, you don't save contexts because they're sort of created at the beginning of a sort of a request that's going on. But we have something unique here. We've got an established sort of client that's coming in. And it would be nice to associate that with a trace ID. So everything that particular client's doing, it would be nice, right?
Yeah.
Which starts here at the bind. But the only way that would work is if we go back into our TCP package at the client level and we either add a context to this or we add a trace ID to this and do it that way. Traditionally, if I see something like this, that's a smell to me. Context in general isn't stateful in the scope of an object. It's data that's passed in the scope of a chain of function calls, right?
Yes.
Like I don't establish a context. Well, technically in a traditional HTTP, every request is a beginning and an ending. So we create a context for beginning to end. What we have now here is when the client is established, it's going to hold. Just like on the WebSocket, it holds. So we're getting it for free on the WebSocket side because it doesn't end immediately. It may stay for like an hour. We kind of have the same situation here where we're going to want to establish a context that holds. So this might be the first time I'm seeing an exception where we have a context here that is at a sort of client connection, right? And everything that we sort of do on that client connection. We don't have a single handler. So that our problem right now is our workflow flows between bind, read, and process over and over and over again. Now, one way to fix that is to change these interfaces to take a context. That's how we do it. That way it's not stateful at a client level. Let's play that out. So we had this interface, right? Where's the interface for the handlers? Where did we put that stuff? This is it right here, right?
Yeah. Interface. Yeah. Read, process, bind.
Right. Let's play this out for a second. So what we're doing is what I think too many projects don't do. We're focused on how are we going to be able to read logs and know what's happening at a client connection level.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. And this is so important that we've stopped to focus on this. This is critically important.
Yes.
And I think what we missed sort of was this, which is what we do on the HTTP side. Remember, I go through this whole thing of having a handler that can take, where's our business note? I go through this whole thing having a handler that takes a context that we create at the initial start of a socket connection into the server so we can do all this. And yet we sort of didn't do that here, did we? No, we didn't. We sort of missed it. So I'm going to change this now to take a context, which means we can go back to our hack program too and make sure that it sort of works. All of these now have to take a context. And the reason is because my brain knows that you don't make context a field in a struct. It's just really is, in a general sense, it's wrong. I think we have an exception for the TCP server, though we'll go back and look at it one more time when we're done. But we need to do that. And then our hack program needs to do this. We can test this with the hack program in a second. Oops. Okay. Okay. So let's go back here. So a new client's been established, right?
Yeah.
We now have this. Now, at this point, I want to create a context. And I want to use the same context for sort of all of this. I want to use it for this. I want to use it for this. And I want to use it for this.
Okay.
A single context. But because it's not just one call, it's 3 calls. Okay. Let's play this out. So if I do this, I'm giving this client a context. I have to store it. But from an API perspective, I can pass it, keep it unexported, but pass it, because that's just the, no, this is going to be a problem. That's not going to work. Because we might have to do what the HTTP package does, Mohammed. Add a context, API.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that if they update the context, we're not going to have it. We're always going to be passing back this base context. See, this doesn't work. Not like the API change that I just made doesn't work. We're going to have to go in the same direction as the language team did. Hold on. All right. We're going to have to go in the same direction as the language team did. So do we have any exported API for a client? No. We had exported fields. But I think we're going to have to do the following. So the HTTP package has a context API, right? That returns a context. And so we can do this. This gives us back our context.
Okay.
But the HTTP package at the request level, let's look it up. See, it has a, this is probably not the right thing to look at, but this is what I want to look at. It had a set, not a width content. I want the set. You see, in our context, but I know they have a set function, right?
Yeah, it comes with the request, but
Yeah.
I also don't know where do they.
I just want to look at the API design. Is what I want.
Context. See context update.
Yeah, but there is a. I just don't remember what the API design was, and I don't see it. Was it with context? Oh, it's with. No. With context is a shallow copy of. Oh, this gives you a new R with the context changed. You see how they did that, this API design? They give you a new R.
And do they store it as well in the
Well, you're
repo?
responsible for using the new R. So what they did is they did the value semantic mutation where given a request with a new context, you get a new request,
Okay.
right? And now you have to work sort of with the new request moving forward, which sort of is fine, I guess, for them. But when I think about this code here, right? The problem is that I can't, if I wanted to do something with the context and keep it, I can't do it here. I can't do it with the API design that they have, like a with, right, with client. Because we're holding the client here. So what I think we're going to have to do for this set context, we're given a context, we sort of update it. And this would allow us to update the context directly. Now, if I have to do it this way, I'm going to be really honest with you. If I have to do it this way, I'd rather make the context part of the API. I just think it feels better.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you'll see, problem is my hack program, for us to see this work, I'd have to hack on this a little bit more for the logger, right? Oh, because now we're doing font. But we can see it in a second. But if I come back here, then we pass it in like this. I just feel like it feels better. And then we give them the ability to sort of update the context. You see, what that will do now is the following. Come here for a second. Why are you complaining? Because, oh, that doesn't implement it anymore. Hold on. I think what that lets us do is the following. Let me do this for a second. So here. So now on the bind, right? I already have a context that was passed to me. Now what I can say is context equals client set context. But what I sort of want to do is the whole point here is to make sure that we have a trace ID in this context when it's all said and done. So actually, we have to do it this way.
Update the context after. Or set the context.
You see, and this sucks that I got the web package here.
Okay.
Like, sucks to no end. So I want to fix that too. But right now, my log function is bound to this web thing for the trace ID. So I don't want to deal with that right now. But you can't give me my UUID package here? Like, really?
There it is.
Like, come on. So you see what I'm doing here, Mohammed?
Yeah.
Right at the time of the bind, we set a trace ID into this context and then set the context to this one. That means now when this gets called, we should see that value, and it should be unique for every bind.
Okay. Per client, yeah.
Connection. Now we
Per
can
connection.
we could test that actually. We can test that actually here on the server sort of thing here, because we could do the following. Context that with value, trace ID. Even here we can do a unique dot new say string, right? And that context equals that. Oh no, sorry. It's not a method. It's a that. So okay, so given this context, we put a new string in it. Then we say client dot set context. That's now our new context.
Mm-hmm.
And I need a key, actually. Type key. Key doesn't matter. Int. And then we just do a var. Call this the key type for now. Var key type 0. Fine. That's our key. We were hacking this a little bit here.
Okay.
All right. And just to make this a little easier for us, because now when I do this, I'll just put, that's a print line, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to hard code the trace ID there. But now what's going to happen in here is we'll have the trace ID in that context. Context dot value.
I think now is a method.
Yeah. You're right. Thanks. Key. And that's going to, damn it. That's going to give us the trace ID, right? And I can just do this for now. So that's our trace ID there. Cool. And well, actually we need to, this is going to give me back any, and I'm going to have to do this, right? Okay. Though it wouldn't have mattered anyway on the print line, but that's fine. And now on the process side, we'll just do it again. Okay, so look, if I run this now, we should see a unique, if I run it with 2 clients, what is it complaining about here? Key redeclared. Did I use the word key twice? Okay. So if we're running with 2 client connections, which we are, right? When we see the server bind, we should see a trace ID, 2 different trace IDs, one for each connection.
Got it.
Assuming that we don't blow anything up there. All right, so I did something wrong here. Client go 255, too many arguments in call.
Have context client. What do you want?
Maybe I didn't save something. Close alt, boom. Doesn't that help? This is where go please sees the edits and takes them, even though I didn't save the file.
Okay.
So here's one trace ID, and here's the other. Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
So now we know that was for one socket connection.
Yeah, that's all related.
And that's for the other one. I hit Control C. Now, it would be nice
to have that same trace ID there
on these connection drops. I don't know why we don't have them there. But yeah, so you see all this logging we now have. Now we should be doing is putting the trace ID in there, you know, now that we have it. So if we look at the internal logger, where is that defined? Mohammed just whole slew of so if we add this trace ID now to the internal logger.
Wondering why don't we use the standard logger package here?
This is a foundational package, so we don't want to import a logger.
Okay. Yeah.
The thing here is, the internal logger. So what I want to do is add a trace ID to the internal logger, right? And if we do that, we might be able to do this a little, maybe not. Let's say I did this. I added the internal logger. So now what's happening is all of this is looking for a trace ID, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, okay, we need a little bit more here. What we did in our hack program is had the bind or the user set the trace ID, right? That's not going to work anymore. We have to set the trace ID here.
In the client.
We have to set it here. What we did up there was an application issue because our application log wants trace IDs from the context on the website. Okay. But what we really need to do is establish a trace ID here. So we're going to need to do a couple things here. If you go, I don't have the service project up, but I'm going to bring it up real quick. I did not expect to be doing this today.
Yeah, sorry, my question.
No, but we need to do this, or we're not going to be able to debug. Like that's why you were here today. I'm looking for this. So I always do something like this. That's what I wanted to steal. This could just be one. So this could be our trace ID key. All right. And then I'm just going to steal some code here. I don't know where I want to keep this just yet, but this could be set. I think this could be unexported. So given that, I don't call that ID, I call that a key, don't I? Okay, so given this, right, really? All right. Okay, and then all that seems right. And then if we do a get, I like having IDs for this because it's just so same thing, trace ID, give me a UUID, and if we don't have one in there for whatever reason, you get an empty one, right?
Okay.
Okay. So now you have this. So now what we do is we want to set this right away. So we can say context equals set trace ID. I don't know why you're doing it this way, but background new. I don't think I need, yeah. Then we can set this as the context, right?
Okay.
Use that on the bind.
Okay.
So now what happens is we establish, just like we do on the website, we establish an initial trace ID for this client.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so it's there. We still want this sort of support because they may want to update the context for their own purpose. What we have to make sure is that yeah, they have to know to not, that's on them. I'm not worried about that. Okay, so look, we've done this, right? We now have a trace ID. Now, I think what might be more efficient for us, though, because we've got to use this trace ID so much, right? And we really have to use it as a string. What might be good for us to do and maybe we wouldn't even do this with a UUID, we just do it with a string. But I like the UUID because then you get zeros back, to be honest with you. But we do this. And then here, okay.
Okay.
And the reason I want to do that is because now for all of these things, I can just say
Trace ID.
trace ID. And I don't have to pull anything out of a context because I already have it in state,
Okay.
right? And it's being used now and all that. And then for the clients, now this is going to actually be, this is the map lookup. So now what I'll want is what does this code do? Given this IP address, am I already in here? Okay, so that's fine. Am I already in here? If it doesn't exist, it's already removed. Yeah, but I don't, okay. So here's a case where I don't have a trace ID for this call because I don't have a client for this call. Right, and we're using the same logger. So
do we really need this log here already removed?
So that's a good question. It's been my experience, especially early on in a project like this, where if you don't write these logs and you don't see that happening, you don't catch a particular bug.
Okay.
Now, what we could do, I mean, it's a call to close, right? And close is sort of done here. So maybe what we need to do instead
do it that way. Okay.
really, maybe it's just, come on. Do it this way, right?
Yeah. Now there's no log there, but you're still getting that.
Because now on the call to close, which is here, now I can do the log and I have a trace ID, right?
Yeah.
That should never happen. So you want to log it if it does.
If it does, that means there's a bug.
I don't know.
Yeah,
you should be panicking because
bad.
how's that possible? Right? And so it's been my experience in these highly concurrent, multi-threaded environments, Mohammed, that if you don't log these little things, they're going to happen and you're not going to know.
Okay. Yeah, good to know.
So, Max, why are we crying? You want to be on air today? Okay, this now takes the trace ID, right? And okay, so that means that our regular logger is going to need to take a trace ID now too. I'll have to think about that. I don't know where that's. Let's do this. Other things will break, but now on the manager side, we have the trace ID. Where is this now red? Like, I don't see that. It's not obvious to me. I hate when I see a red bar and I don't see red in the. Okay, so now we're trying to call the log for the client manager. Here we're trying to call
72.
log for client manager. Let's start with server for a second though. Because now we've got the same problem, right? And I had said to you that I wanted a trace ID for the server too, right? That unique ID.
Yeah.
So we should be able to put it in here one more time. I don't think we need a context for this. I just need a trace ID. So what if we did the same thing here? Just made it a string, right? And then, oh, this is even better, dude. No, it's not even better. I would need a trace ID here where we do this, right? No, I need the trace ID, so that's not a problem. Trace ID uuid.new string. So now I have a trace ID there. And that means that everywhere we want to log, we now can do serve.trace ID. Everywhere we need to log. Man, they put the little red line at the end and I couldn't see it.
Yeah, it kind of hides.
But now we have a unique trace ID here, even at the server level. Okay. Where am I missing? Where am I missing? Let's see. Okay. So here somewhere missing. Sometimes when I can't see it, I just look in.
Oh, it's line 151.
Right here. Yeah.
Damn.
It
Couldn't see
was so
it.
hard.
No, it was not easy. So I think we can do the same thing with the client manager, right? Have a trace ID here. Construct a trace ID here. And now everywhere here, it's cm.trace ID.
Mm-hmm.
So the manager will have a unique trace ID now too, right? Okay. Now, what that means is the following. Come back to our hack program for a second. We have support for this, right? But now what we need is to be able to get the trace ID. Okay, a couple things. We need to do this at our application level. We're going to need to do something a little different, but I don't need to do this anymore. If I want to print the trace ID now, how do we do that? The client already has a trace ID, doesn't it? Let's go back.
Yeah. Trace ID. Yep.
It already has a trace ID that so why can't we just do this? We did that, then this just becomes, see, we don't want to have to do that every time in the main service, which is why we're going to want to write the trace ID back into the web framework's context or that API so that logger function can automagically sort of pick it up. But you see now with this, The package sort of does it for free, and we don't need to do any of this right now. We still might need to do something with the context. So we're going to have it, right? Well, we only did it here. So we're going to have it. But at least now there's a trace ID associated with this thing. And we have to fix this now because this now takes a trace ID string. And we're just logging it this way, right? So now anything that happens, we get the trace ID too, but we're also able to log specific things in here with the trace ID. So let's see what happens now when we run this. Because even the client manager now has a trace ID, doesn't it? Yeah. Let's see what happens when we run it. And this is what we wanted.
Yeah.
Down here. The 2 trace IDs now on the connect.
Mm-hmm.
We get all that for free. So see how powerful this is?
Yeah.
Now we know everything related to that one connection. The ID in and of itself is irrelevant. It's just that it's applied everywhere that's needed.
So that we can see, what happened. If something happened with that specific client, we
Yeah,
can track it
we
down.
know that it was that one, and we can just see everything that it did as opposed to what. Now, this ended up being the ID for the server. So everything related to the server is here, right? This ID. Now, this one's interesting.
That one's. It's the only waiting.
We have to understand what that is because that's an event. It's an accept info. And we don't see it again. I also don't see another event. I do see this.
I see.
Waiting for server to start. Oh, yeah, we waited for the server to start. Then we accepted. Here's a bind, right? Server bind. There should be a second server bind. That's right here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is waiting. We were waiting for a socket connection, but I don't know why. Let's find this right here. Waiting first. Let's just, yeah, we've got to play this out. Here's the client manager. Everything related to the client manager. Okay, let's find this real quick. Accept info waiting, which for me should be
Waiting.
okay. That's this here.
Yeah, 156.
Okay.
So we have 4 trace IDs, right? 1 for server, 1 for client manager, and 2 for clients.
This log's in the wrong place. That log belongs there. That's why we only saw it once.
Okay.
Now, that was the server, right? And that's the only time we see the server ID unless something's failing or completed listener. Ooh. What we didn't see is this, did we?
Completed listener.
Shutdown.
No.
Oh.
Well, did you shut it down? Did you?
Oh, we haven't shut it
Yeah.
down yet. Dummies. There it is. Okay. My bad.
Yeah.
But we did find the bug here. This needed to be inside the loop. We're saying that we're waiting for a new connection. We didn't see it. Okay, we now have full trace ID support, which I think is implemented pretty good. We get it here, and you can have access to it at the client level. And we've given you the ability now to manipulate that context in the case that we might need to sort of do that. So now this changes to be a trace ID string, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, trace ID. Oh, however, that's interesting. Oh, maybe we don't need to worry about putting it in the context anymore. Except it's going to show, okay. So now we have a problem with our app, not with the TCP package, right?
Okay.
Because the info is always going to make this call. We've told it, find the trace ID here.
Okay.
Okay. However, there's a chance now. You know what we can do? You know what we could do? I wonder if
Yeah, either get from web or from TCP.
Yeah. I know you can never do that though, can you? How do you?
Nil? Was it nil?
I can't remember how to do that. View ID that.
Parentheses. Put it inside the parentheses.
But I think there's a. Every time I do this, later on I remember that there's an API that can check if a UUID is a UUID. Oh, maybe it's a method. Like,
I think if you put it in the round brackets.
I just want to see the method there. U dot. I can't say. Yeah. Nil. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Dude, I knew there was something there.
No, it's an empty.
Except trace ID is okay. It does. Okay. This. Oh, right. This has to return a string, right? So, so what if we did this? Oh, but it's a string, isn't it? Why am I so confused? That returned a UUID.
Yeah.
I wanted a variable. Okay, let's just do this. Can we just do this? Again, it's going to return nil, right? Pull it out of the trace. Pull it out of the web package first, right? If it's not nil, return that string, or just return whatever the string is for TCP. If it's nil, we're getting zeros anyway.
Okay.
I don't know which one you see more. I think you see this one more. That's why I want to do that sort of first. So this path will run most of the time. So now I don't have to worry about the trace ID being in there. And for our purposes, I can ignore the trace ID coming in here because this log's gonna auto-magically sort of print it. We can test this logic now on the server side of things. Now that when we start it, right, we're gonna get that for free. So if I come back here, we don't need to do this anymore. Right? I won't need to do that anymore. Not that we're binding anything just yet. But I should see, sorry. I should see the trace ID now, auto-magically. But we don't need to do this anymore either, do we? Oh. Wait a second. We may have a chicken and the egg problem. I did this so it would be in there. We don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. But the problem is that this is the context that's going to be used. That's not the context that needs to be used here. The context that needs to be used here, we don't have a context anymore. Okay. Man, this is confusing. Here's a situation where I don't want the logger to do anything. We're going to make some logic changes to our logger here in a second.
Okay.
All right. We're going to do the same thing here now. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to return an empty string. Okay. So if this happens to have a trace ID, return it. If this happens to have a trace ID, return it. Right?
Okay.
Now, I need to look at the logger for a second. This is the function that it calls. If there is a function, then call it and add trace ID to it. But this is what I want to change now. If it's not equals nil, I don't know what to call this just yet. This is kind of what I really want. See what I'm doing?
If it's not empty, it's not an empty string.
If it's not an empty string, then append it. But if it is, sort of leave it out.
Okay.
Right? Just leave it out. I'm going to have to add this back to the service code. Because with that little line, what this change will allow me to do now is the following. I can say if there's a trace ID in any of these two things, then apply it, right?
Yeah.
Now, we have another problem here. I'm getting the trace ID, right? So maybe, in all honesty, I'm always getting it, whether it's the client one or not. So maybe this is all we need to do. If this happens to be part of a web request and it's there, right? Return it.
Not empty.
return the empty string, and this will allow us to use our trace ID here. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're going to have the same thing on the client manager, but we're getting the trace ID through this sort of interface.
Got it.
I mean, I know we've, at the client level, we haven't even put it in the context anymore, did we? We only have the set and the trace ID at the client level. We didn't. We had a, like, I don't think we need this anymore. Let me see something. Nothing went red.
Right here, 42.
I don't think we need this anymore. At all. We do need the context, but see, I don't think we needed that anymore because we're handing the trace ID already at the logging level. The only thing we need to support is their ability to update the context if it's needed, which I don't think it is. I mean, it might be for us later. All we need is the trace ID. So now what that means here is we have access to the trace ID via the client if we want to do any logging here. See, okay. Let me see this runs and then I'll tell you the problem that I just remembered that's going to kill us. But let's just see what happens here if we run the server. Make run cap. The problem is that if you ask somebody to write the trace ID, they will forget to do it.
Okay.
Okay? If you make it a requirement that they have to add a trace ID when they want to log, the chances of them missing it is good.
Got it.
Okay, so that's our server, right? We're waiting. Hit Control C, and we see it. So that's working, right? We got a trace ID. We got it for free. And we're never going to miss logging it because it's here.
Got it.
Okay? It's here. It's done auto-magically. The only place we could forget to do it potentially is in the TCP package, but we've made it a requirement, and that's not going to happen. Okay? But when it comes to our logger is just key value pairs. So here's what potentially can happen. We're now coding these handlers, which we're going to have to.
Yep.
We're going to be doing something like this, log.info. Server handler. All right, let's call it server handler, right? .log.info. Context. Some message. Okay. And now some arguments. Now, here's the thing. Maybe it's okay if we end up doing this manually. Okay. Client doesn't have a client ID, it has a trace ID. But right now, we're required in these functions to manually do that.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That sort of sucks. We know that when we call log info, this is the thing. I know that when we call log info, see, this function's going to get called. That function's going to get called. So that's why at the client level, I can sort of put some of this back for a second. At the client level, if I do this, right, I put the trace ID in the context, and I have this API called client dot or TCP dot get trace ID. And I come back up here and do this. What that means is that when I'm here, and we're not going to see it today,
You don't have to do that.
I'll get it automatically.
No.
I'll get it automatically.
No user error.
I just, right? I get it automatically. Now, that's a beautiful situation here for us because of the way our logger, for our hack program where we're not using the logger, I had to manually do it. I've learned that when you ask somebody to manually do that, they're going to forget. So it's still good to have the trace ID API, but by having it in the context and doing this, logging is expensive, so this doesn't bother me, okay? By doing this, now when we write this handler code, sorry, we made it into the domain. When we write this handler code, I don't have to worry about it.
Got it.
Now, maybe because this code is so simple here, it's overkill. But we're going to be running through that function anyway. So what the heck?
Yeah,
right?
You're already there.
We're already there. What do you think, Mohammed?
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do the following because it's the 2-hour mark here. Let's save what we've got and, well, let's add notes because I'm adding some real notes here. Okay, so we spent the last class adding context and trace ID support to TCP, right?
Yeah.
Trying to stay within that 80. Okay.
It misspelled trace.
Yeah, it's probably more me than anything else. Okay. All right. We started adding the TCP server to the CAP service. We have that down here. We know that's working now, right?
Yep.
I'm going to leave this TCP context thingamajig because now, damn it, it just made me realize something. We have a context now. I'm going to add a note that says the following. Look into passing context into the logger function. We may have one. So imagine if this got the client context too, instead of this situation, right? Now I can't use it though for this. This would be separate. And new server handlers took a context. Why did we do that? But that doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, probably we don't need this anymore.
All right, we solved that problem. When I told you anytime that's the case, that's a smell.
Yeah, that was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it was a massive smell, right? We don't need it at all anymore. And we shouldn't have needed it. However, I'm thinking that when we we're going to do it now, but we need to look at context with the logger function. Okay, because honestly, this is always going to be empty unless we're using the context. Right now, with the way this is written, and in the future, this code will never work.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to solve this context problem.
Okay.
We have to look at it. So look into passing content as a logger function. We may have one. Okay. And then we have to start up the client manager. And then sort of wire in that double click to the client manager. But
okay.
I think we've got another sort of half an hour. I think that context, now that there's there, has to be passed into that logger call. So the context is not going to work. All right, let's got an ant running around my keyboard. What just happened there, man? Okay, git add all, git commit -m, context work for trace IDs. Bob. Okay, so man, those 2 hours go by so fast, dude.
They do.
You feel like you haven't been productive, but the reality is that there's going to be bugs in this highly concurrent nightmare of ours. And we're going to have to need these trace IDs to sort of figure anything out. So Mohammed bringing that up was pretty critical. Default branch, one critical, one high. Hold on a second. What are they talking about? I have to update some dependencies now. What do we need? Oh, I don't care. I have 2FA. I don't know why that's like that. But there's some security thing. Hold on. NAT server may fail to authorize certain. Okay, so do I have to update some dependencies? Are we that far behind? Hold on. Make deps upgrade. This will do a go get to upgrade all the. Every month, twice a month, on the 1st and like 15th of the month, I go through all my projects, personal and client, and I do this.
You just upgrade all the.
At least normally twice a month. Worst case, once a month. But it looks like it's been a tiny bit of a while since we did this. I don't have any tests. So normally after you do this, you need to run some tests to make sure you didn't break anything.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any tests. No, I mean, we can do a make run cap. Make sure it comes up. Got to do a whole big rebuild because it's been a while since we upgraded all these dependencies. So yeah, we're fine there. But should be gone now. Yeah, no more security.
Oh, okay.
Problems.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a nice feature. At Prediction Guard, we just added a at Prediction Guard, we just added a tool. Go bring up your Slack. You'll see a channel in there called no,
I don't have it.
You don't have it. We added a really cool product called Aikido. Hold on, let me bring it up here. AIKIDO.
There it is.
So we just started using, I hate when Chrome's CSS. We just started using this at Prediction Guard. And essentially it monitors looks at all of the code and all the repos we have, and then it has a Slack API. So every once in a while on the Slack, that channel lights up, and my stomach hurts. I'm like, please not let it be mine. Please not let it be mine. Please not let it be mine. And it usually isn't. It's usually all the Python code.
Nice.
That's expected, right?
As expected, yeah.
And what is it? It just goes through and checks for vulnerabilities.
Just like what GitHub is doing with the Dependy bot. It's going through, it has a database of vulnerabilities, and it's going through your projects and seeing if you have that listed. And if it does, it lets you know. And this is doing that too. And I'm sure it does even more.
Okay.
But it's really cool stuff, right? Because I forgot that I hadn't updated that project, because I don't like touching that repo until we're on the show.
Gotcha.
I don't want somebody, like, everything that we do there should be on the show.
Yeah.
So I keep forgetting to update. So that was nice that we saw that, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen you like do that really before in person.
No, I just did it to all my projects a few days ago because we were at the top of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I do the brew update, sometimes when I see something like that come in, a new kind or new something that I know another project's using, then I got to do it again. So
yeah.
Okay, Mohammed, this was awesome, dude. Having you here was helpful. We'll let's get him back on Thursday if you have time. This was good. We've got to get this done, but every time we try to integrate it, we're seeing more and more things. You might want to take this TCP package when we're completely done here and republish it as a thing. Though, as you already saw, there's some really badass projects out there that do this sort of really well. But for simple stuff like what we're going to do, it's kind of nice to own the code and keep it simple. Those other projects get very sort of complicated quickly when they're trying to be everything for everyone. All right. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, indeed. I just quickly mentioned this. Before I was trying to write peer-to-peer signing algorithm in blockchain, which is called TSS, Threshold Signature Schema. That when you want to sign a contract, you can have a private key or which you sign, or you could have a multi-sig approach that you have 4 persons and they need to sign, or you could do this TSS, which means there is one private key, but no one owns it. It's like divided between n parties, and then you do a round. Each party does its own job. And then in the end, no one knows what is the private key, but you are still able to sign a transaction. So it's very secure, very safe. But I was supposed to write it in a peer-to-peer distributed approach, which was very hard for me. But I think after seeing your show and this approach, that how do you handle the low level, the high level, I think it will be much easier for me if I want to go and rewrite that again.
Yeah, like sometimes this is all you need in terms of establishing a connection and sending data. You don't need all the other stuff, especially if you can control the IP address on both sides, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a cool little. I've heard of the multi-sig. I haven't heard of this new sort of private key. It's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah, search it and look it up. It's really cool. TSS and then TSS P2P. That's the next level of TSS, which super secure.
Nice. All right, we're gonna shut this thing down. We'll see everybody again on Thursday. And hopefully we find a connection established.
Yeah.
All right. Hold on a second.